Hello, everyone. My name is Desmond Williams. I am going to share my screen and we are going to get ourselves ready to get started. My name is Desmond Williams. I know some of you are at home, some of you are in your offices. It could be day, it could be night. You could be thinking about this important topic on a weekend. But wherever you are, I want to thank you for joining us as COVID has pretty much turned the world on its heels. One of the great things that it's done is it has allowed for us to democratize conversations in regards to education. And we don't necessarily have to travel across country to hear leading experts have conversations about things that they're passionate about. But again, wherever you are, I thank you for being here. School year 2020-21 has been probably the most difficult year for educating children that teachers have ever experienced. And I certainly know that 2020, school year 2019-2020 was no slouch given what happened last year around this time. But I just want to acknowledge you as a teacher, as a principal, as a diocesan leader. I thank you for the work that you have done as a former teacher and principal myself. The work that you do does not go unnoticed. So I want to publicly take the time to acknowledge you. I want to thank Jill Annable, and I want to thank the National Catholic Education Association for giving me the opportunity to talk about and discuss this very important topic. Our topic discussion is around firefighting for Black boys in Catholic school spaces. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Desmond Williams. I am a former teacher. I started my career teaching here in Washington, D.C. as a special educator. I have been a classroom teacher for a number of years. I again, started my career as a special educator, but I also taught middle school ELA. I also taught third grade for a number of years, which is probably my most memorable experience as a classroom teacher. I've been a assistant principal and a principal, and I've also been a quasi administrator as a special education coordinator. And teaching in the inner city and being a special education teacher, you are a de facto teacher of all boys. I'm most passionate about teaching boys. I started Nylinka School Solutions in the summer of 2018 after having served as a principal at an all boys school for 6 years. That was a private Episcopal school. And that experience, coupled with my experience as a special education teacher in the inner city, really got me to thinking about how do we best serve Black boys. So that is what I'm most passionate about. And Nylinka School Solutions does a variety of things to help schools support Black boys. But beyond my time as an author, a teacher, and an educator, I'm also a father. As of this fall, I will have two daughters who are in Catholic schools. So I come with a variety of experiences, and you will kind of see that I bring all of those things to bear in this conversation that we're having about Black boys. So, Desmond, we're talking about firefighting for Black boys. What is firefighting? So we'll talk about that. Our goals is we're going to create context around the stereotypes that we can typically think of when we think of Black boys. In doing so, we're going to pathologize the things that need to be pathologized. We're going to discuss why Black boys typically appear to be completely disenfranchised. They're on this end of the spectrum, but how we can also see them as just teetering on being academically excellent. And they just kind of waver back and forth in between those, across that spectrum, excuse me. The last goal we're going to discuss is why some of our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives tend to not have the impact that we expect them to have, or why they sometimes completely belly flop and fizzle out. So, what is firefighting? I in February of 2020, I published my first book, The Burning House: Educating Black Boys in Modern America. And one of the things I do in the book is I split teaching into two buckets. And great teaching, understanding pedagogy, understanding reteaching, understanding assessment, understanding brain-based differences between students, multiple learning modalities. That is the bar of entry for being a great teacher. I split the practice into those two buckets, the pedagogy, the second being the political. And the political is the advocacy work that's necessary to support Black boys, because so much of what happens to Black and Brown children is dictated by mandates and the halls of power and school boards and state education agencies and the like that we don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis. So when I use the term firefighting, I want you to think advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. Okay. So what typically happens to Black boys in schools? The national data tells us, and this data changes from year to year, but the results of the data don't change. Black boys are the lowest performing in reading and in math. There are discrepant behavioral consequences for Black boys. They are the least likely to be referred for AP and honors courses, even when they have the grades and the qualifications to do so. We have the lowest graduation rates typically, and we are the least understood and the least cared about. And I know those final two bullets may strike a nerve with some people, but I'm going to try to prove that. Well, not try, I'm going to prove that a little bit later on in our conversation. So, when we know that our Black boys are living in this space in this slide here, what do we typically do as educators and as parents? And I know certainly I did this. We try to justify or rationalize or come up with reasons why they present the way they present. And we say things such as they come from broken homes. I heard that one a lot. I use that one a lot. His mother won't pick up the phone. All he cares about is sports and video games. My personal favorite is he plays in class and he's Mr. Williams, he's so disrespectful. I mean, if he disrespect me one more time, I'm not having that, right? He doesn't study, he doesn't do homework, and he doesn't participate. Or he gives a lot, but he gives it inconsistently. He does not give us his all. They or he appears to be anti-intellectual. I wish I had an opportunity to delve more into that topic. I just don't. And they are so aggressive and combative, which is the most incendiary of any of these comments. So we tend to try to create an understanding of why Black boys present the way they present and why they're not performing well academically and socially. But in doing so, we tend to pathologize them. And the question that I have, Catholic school teacher, Catholic school leader, Catholic school principal, or person who's working at the diocese, is if we are Christ-centered, why are we letting this happen in our schools? Are we of the belief that Black children, Black boys are not equal? Do we believe the stereotypes that were promulgated through slavery and Jim Crow and the Black codes and such that says that Black people are subhuman, that we don't have the intellectual intelligence or the intellectual capacity to be on par with our white peers, with our Native American peers, and so on and so forth? Do we believe that? Because if we don't, Why do we continue to allow the reading scores? Why do we continue to allow the math scores, the discrepant uh, behavioral and disciplinary data? Why do we allow that to happen right under our noses? When I talk to school leaders, I often ask, what are the principles of the principles? So, what we need to do is, have we considered pathologizing the system? In my book, The Burning House, and I know this is pretty small, you may not be able to see this, but I talk about the issues of racism that Black boys face in schools and how they're very difficult for teachers to see, because teachers are products of that system. And for teachers to be products of that system and to work in education, they must have had some amount of success. So there is a immunization, if you will, of teachers in the system where they're just not allowed to see how the things that they do on a day-to-day basis that were helpful to them as teachers and that are helpful for a large percentage of their students are absolutely devastating to Black boys. Okay. And that's going to be what we talk about today. Have we considered pathologizing the system? Because if you don't, then by default, you are believing that Black boys are not equal to white males, white females, and every other group. So let's think about how we pathologize the system. Okay. What you have here is a QR code for pathologizing the system. You can use your smartphone. If you have a QR reader, that's great. If you don't, you can simply use your camera. Scan this QR code. It's going to take you to my company website. And there's a document that I want you to download. And it is asking you, how prepared are you as a teacher or even as a school leader to work with Black boys? Okay. Be honest. It is an assessment tool to help you game plan for the future. If you are a principal or if you are a uh, department chair, I ask you to print out multiple copies and have your department fill it out, have your grade level fill it out. If you're a principal, have your entire teaching staff fill it out so you can begin to think about, how do we change our practices, because our Black students can have the same results as our white male students, our white female students, and whoever else the highest performing students in our children in our school happen to be. So document that. I'm sorry, download the pathologizing snapshot and keep it and use it as a data point. And we're going to come back to why that data and information is so important a little bit later on. Now, if our school community is bold enough to know that there's nothing wrong with our Black boys, that there's nothing wrong with our brown boys, or there's nothing wrong with our quote unquote minority students, if we are bold enough to do that, we start taking steps to find out, well, what is wrong? And here's what inevitably happens. We start a book club. And after that book club, we have when those book clubs start, we have a tremendous amount of energy. There's a tremendous amount of fervor. We're asking and answering questions. And in many instances, well, in some instances, we are really reflecting on our practices. But it tends to die down. And then there is another pain point that stirs the pot in the community, where we start thinking about race and equity and what's happening for our marginalized students. What do? We start a book club, and then that fizzles out. Then what happens? We start another book club. So I think you get where I'm going with this hamster wheel approach, or this cycle of thinking in terms of low hanging fruit to support Black boys or marginalized groups in our buildings in general. The problem or the question that I have, the $1,000,000 question is this: do the interventions that you are using in your school to support these disenfranchised groups, in this case, Black boys, is it reversing the disenfranchisement? Think about the equity initiatives, all of the interventions that you're doing. Think of it as an equation, right? Putting it on a scale, if you will. Is that heavier than the inequity and the racism that boys face in schools? We cannot, as school leaders, we cannot, as teachers, we cannot, as firefighters, believe that the low hanging fruit of a book club is going to undo the disenfranchisement that Black boys face. So, what are the interventions? What is the approach? We cannot engage in these interventions because they're low hanging fruit or because they make us feel better. Can those interventions reverse the disenfranchisement? That's the $1,000,000 question. Okay. Again, I showed this slide again, the lowest performing in reading and math, discrepant behavioral consequences, those Black boys who are eligible or qualified for AP or honors courses are not being referred, the least represented, the least understood, and the least cared about. And the reason why I say they are the least cared about is because when I work with schools, what we know from the last 60 or 70 years is that Black boys, academically and socially, have always been at the bottom of the academic food chain. So, as I said in the beginning of our conversation or the beginning of our learning journey together, the numbers may change, but the positionality of Black boys has not changed. So how can we, Catholic school leader, how can we, Catholic school teacher, say that we're Christ-centered and we're working to create a world that's just if we keep allowing this to happen under our noses? What are the principles of the principles? Okay, so let me go on. I used the term in the previous slide, interventions reversing disenfranchisement. Desmond, where does the disenfranchisement come from? Well, that's where we're going to spend the next several minutes. And the reason why I want to stay there, let me go back to that slide. You will hear conversations about, from in books that you read, from authors that I actually really respect, talking heads, the news media, we talk about the school to prison pipeline as Black boys being suspended from school because whatever the case may be. We think about school resource officers in schools who end up disciplining children as opposed to teachers disciplining children. And though those things, particularly discipline from resource officers, is devastating and detrimental and actually inhumane, that is not the school to prison pipeline as a whole. The school to prison pipeline is based on disenfranchisement. Catholic school teacher, that could be happening in your classroom. Catholic school leader, Catholic school principal, that is happening in your classrooms. The disenfranchisement is not just suspensions. It's a myriad of things that we do that decenter Black boys in their education and pushes them to the margins and make them feel dehumanized. And it's unconscious. I don't believe teachers are coming to school in a public school, a parochial school setting, or a Catholic school setting. I don't believe teachers are waking up saying, what are we going to do today to disenfranchise our Black boys? Because I'm so up for that. It doesn't work like that. So I want you to hear me out over these next couple of slides. Number one tool of disenfranchisement is the curriculum. Who's being celebrated in your curriculum and content? Is Black History Month and Women's History Month only celebrated in February and March of each year? Does your school use terms like Pythagorean theorem? And I'm pointing out Pythagoras because he came on the scene long after Egyptians had built pyramids. And you can't build pyramids without a supreme understanding of the quote unquote Pythagorean theorem. So why do we use terms like that to describe a mathematical understanding that occurred long before he came on the scene if we're not bolstering and celebrating white male accomplishment? So what does your let me read this directly. What values does your curriculum communicate implicitly? Do we skip Hispanic Heritage Month because it's inconvenient? Does your staff know of the accomplishments of the Moors, the Olmecs, Timbuktu, Queen Candace, Queen of Sheba, great civilizations of East African civilizations, et cetera, et cetera? And I hesitate to use the term Africa because Africa is a continent with 54 distinct and sovereign nations. But what I want to point out is that there is a history for each of those 54 sovereign nations, and we don't typically discuss it in our schools. And that's not a knock on Catholic schools, that's across this planet, right? That's not an American phenomenon. We don't discuss those things. But what we do that I think is absolutely I would call it academic violence is we tend to think of Black history as what happened to African Americans post emancipation, what happened after 1865. So we need to be rethinking what we are celebrating in our history, in our social studies, in our literature. But as I said with the Pythagorean theorem, even in our math content. Okay, moving on. The instruction, a researcher by the name of David Rapp, who was at the time at Northwestern University, found that the majority of the work that we ask our students to do is textbook and workbook driven. At the elementary level, approximately 83% of lessons and activities were textbook and ditto sheet driven. And that number shoots up to the high 80s when we talk about what happens in middle and high school. So the work is based on chalk talk and sit and get. We are not asking our boys to move. There's so much brain-based research and data that talks about brain-based differences between boys and girls, how boys and girls respond to movement, but that it is so much easier for girls to sit, to listen, to memorize, and to write, but how those things actually, for lack of a better word, turn off the male brain to the degree that there's less crosstalk between the hemispheres, how the male brain goes to sleep at certain times, but that the movement is allowing them to recharge and recreate, if you will, the crosstalk that's necessary to engage in a lot of the content that we're asking boys to engage in, particularly left brain activities. And how do we center differentiation and not make it a footnote? One of the big things that I do with school is I stress that differentiation is a tool of equity. When I first became a principal, I let teachers use whatever lesson plan template that they wanted to use. I didn't have a format per se, but what I found is the differentiation didn't look like what it needed to look like in order to support all of our students. So I had to, which was actually counterintuitive to me as a school leader, I had to create a lesson plan template for my teachers, and it had to say distinctly what students are in what group for this lesson. Why are students in this group for this particular lesson? What are those groups of students doing? And what are they being asked to produce during this lesson? And how does that look different from what's happening in a quote unquote whole group instruction? And how is that supported in your learning centers? Okay, as principals, we have to inspect what we expect. And as classroom teachers, we have to plan for the different learning modalities that happen in our classroom. The other thing I want to mention quickly, because I'm running short on time because I just talk too much, is we have to reconsider the products that we're asking children to produce. In many Catholic spaces that I work in, change is a curse word. Let me just put it like that. So we are very traditional in our approach. Our students are sitting in rows in many instances. In some instances, let me not say many. Our children are sitting in rows and we're engaged in that chalk and talk and sit and get. And I'm saying we need to be thinking more about project-based learning, about inquiry-based learning, where children are discovering and learning with the quote unquote dual intensity. The research tells us that that benefits all students. That's not something that's just germane to activating um, and engaging Black males. That benefits everyone. Moving along. The other relevance gap beyond your curriculum and beyond the pedagogy, how we teach, is I looked up and found some data from NCEA, and there are approximately 150 Catholic school teachers across the nation. And if I recall, this data is from 2017. There are approximately 6,000 Catholic schools across the country. Nationally, we know that Black males make up approximately 2% of the teaching workforce. But how many Black males is that per school? Well, 2% of 150,000 is 3,000 teachers. And what that means is we have one Black male for every 2 Catholic schools. Or if we split those 3,000 Black male educators into the 6,000 Catholic schools, we have half of a Black male in every Catholic school. So this is what I'm saying to you, diocesan leader. This is what I'm saying to you, Catholic school principal. When there is turnover in your school, what value do you place on having representation that will help and support the Black male students in your building? There's a ton of research that suggests, and I'm thinking about one that was done in North Carolina public schools. I believe it was in Greensboro and Charlotte Mecklenburg, that stated that the capacity or the potential for Black males to attend school went up from approximately 21% to over 59% when Black males had at least one elementary school teacher that was a Black male educator. And the numbers were remarkably similar for Black girls as well. Again, my daughters attend Catholic. Well, my daughter attends Catholic school. I have a 3-year-old, an almost 3-year-old, who will be attending Catholic school in the fall of 2021. And I just looked through my daughter, she's in kindergarten, her religion book. And where do Black children fit into the Catholic world? That was the question that I had from my teacher's principal last year. And that's the question I'm asking you, Catholic school teacher and Catholic school principal. Because I picked out 14 images, and these 4 are just a representation of what I saw. I did not see any imaging that would lead me to believe as a parent, or that would lead me to believe as a student that that I am valued. Okay. According to NCEA data, almost 20% of Catholic school children are non-white. But is that represented in our curriculum? What pictures do we have on our walls? What pictures do we have up in our classrooms? Okay. Moving on to another mode of disenfranchisement, behavioral discipline and emotional issues that disenfranchise Black boys. Black children are suspended at 3 times the rate as white children. Okay. Across disciplinary infractions, I'm skipping to this third bullet point. Black boys are given harsher penalties for offenses that white males who commit the same crime, the same offense. So what does that mean, Desmond? That means Black boy is chewing gum in class. White boy is chewing gum in class. The Black boy will get a harsher and stiffer consequence. Black boy fights in school. White boy fights in school. Statistically, the Black boy will get a harsher consequence. Okay? Excuse me, that was my timer letting me know that I'm talking too much. Okay? Black boy fights in school. White boy fights in school. Black boy brings contraband to school. White male brings contraband to school. In all instances, statistically, Black boys will get a stiffer consequence and a stiffer penalty. Okay. So I hope you can see the marginalization and how Black boys are being pushed and being decentered and moved towards disenfranchisement because of the ill treatment and the feelings that's being created implicitly and sometimes explicitly, the feeling that they do not belong. I hope you are able to see how that disenfranchisement occurs. And this is even in your school where many of our Black boys are coming to you from quote unquote middle class backgrounds. The data tells us that disenfranchisement occurs if they're coming from a middle class home, a lower middle class home. This is happening regardless of social economic status. Okay. Reflection number 2, we're close to closing out. The potential of Black males. Use your QR reader again. This is going to take you back to our company website. So technically, if you were already on the site, I want you to download the Delpit reflection. This is a quote from Lisa Delpit in the book, Other People's Children. Please download and please respond to her quote. I love Lisa Delpit. I could talk about Dr. Delpit all day, but I am in the process of creating a companion guide / field guide / journal for my book, The Burning House, Educating Black Boys in Modern America. And I am looking for quotes and entries from you that I can use in this companion piece. So by all means, download the reflection, respond to it, and email it to me. I can't promise you that I will put it in the companion piece, but I will read it and I will respond to your reflection. But a very powerful statement on what it means to be an educator and what it means to be an educator of other people's children. Okay. And again, you can email the response to info@nylinka.org. And it may make sense to simply read the reflection and then type your response right in the email to me. Okay. Moving forward, what do we find with our equity initiatives? Many initiatives do not stick in the long run. And what we found is that we often sequence things wrong. There's no root cause analysis. There's a lack of resources and a lack of guidance. So what do you mean by that, Desmond, as we close out? I want you, diocesan leader, I want you, Catholic school leader, to think about what is the appropriate sequence for us to tackle the things that we're seeing happening in our school. Desmond, your presentation, the disenfranchisement of Black boys and our curriculum and suspension, we get all that. Like, I can see that we have to do something about our suspension data. So we're going to adopt a social emotional learning program. But what I have found is if things are not sequenced right, things tend to belly flop. So we have to think about one of the things that I do is I help schools with equity audits. And what we have found is having another group zero in and laser in and literally audit why things look the way in our school gives us the opportunity to game plan around how we create a more equitable place. For instance, going back to the example I gave around student discipline and data, you can look at your data and just see that we're suspending Black children more than we should. But as opposed to implementing social emotional learning, maybe we need to be thinking about our teacher mindset. Maybe we need to be thinking about bias reduction. Maybe we need to be thinking about our curriculum and instruction because it's boring and that's causing students to act out. So, one of the things that I help schools do, and I actually received this help when I was a principal, was figure out what were the points of leverage for us as a school and as an institution that would allow us to get the biggest gains the quickest. And then what hand holding do schools need to create an equity plan that will dovetail into the 1 year, 3 year, and maybe 5 year school improvement plans that are already in place. So those are some like real quick hitters on why some of our equity initiatives don't stick. And sometimes they look like what I reimagined earlier in talking about the book clubs. And again, it's not the book club, it's the lack of follow up. Okay. Um, Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, my time is up. This is contact information for me. You can reach me at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Nylinka. If you are in need of a thought partner as a classroom teacher, you want to bounce some ideas off of me, I am here to help you because, again, centering Christ, how to recreate a world of justice for Black boys. Like, how do we take down the dominoes that consistently hinder their progress? So, my email is there, dwilliams@nylinka.org. You can call. I will get back with you, but I thank you for your time. And I hope you gain from this. And I look forward from hearing from you. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.